University of Florida. He also had his own private practice at the Flagler Hospital in St. Augustine. He has published over 60 scientific articles, including a monograph on brain blood flow. His recent articles were on the neuroscience of meditation, the multi-stream self, Turiya, Pranadhyana, Vedic psychology as a source of wisdom, secular wisdom, and the cognitive pause and unload, the CPU hypothesis of meditation and creativity. A chapter on the embodied brain-mind itself is in print at present. His latest book is called The Astonishing Brain and Holistic Consciousness, Neuroscience and Vedanta Perspectives, Nova Science Publishers 2012. Poetry, photography, and oil painting are his hobbies, and he has multiple pages on his website. They're lovely. He has published 5 books of his original poetry, essays, and photographs. His website is poetsmiles.com, and he recently received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Marquise's Who's Who. We're delighted to welcome Dr. Vinod Deshmukh.
What a beautiful flame this is. It is the flame of the sacred. And by saying Namaste, I bow down to that flame of the sacred within all of you and around all of us. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming here this morning and attending this session. I also want to thank my family and also my late parents who taught me everything from the beginning till now, and my younger sister who passed away a few years ago. So I have a loving memory of her. I also want to especially thank Robin Manahan for inviting me for this occasion. And finally, I want to thank the great sacred reality that we all share and we are part of. So talking about the sacred, here is a poem I wrote recently called Mystery of the Sacred. Our experiential reality is tripartite, meaning having 3 parts: bio, psycho, spiritual, biophysical, psychosocial, and cultural, spiritual, or body, mind, and spirit in simple words. Biophysical part includes all the biomolecules, biophysical energies, their complex activation patterns and assemblies manifesting in various life forms and with their unique functional activities. The psychosocial part includes all of our experienced contents of the mind, such as intentions, thoughts, emotions, speech, images, our creative intelligence, our sense of ego or subjectivity, agency, which shapes all of our experiences and interactions with others. The cultural part includes the whole universe of intuitive and creative ideas, including arts, sciences, philosophy, music, painting, morality, governance, justice, and economic institutions. And the spiritual part includes the universe of ineffable energy, awareness, being, which pervades all life events and experiences and gives us the meaning and purpose for life. It is a spontaneous feeling of connectedness, unity, and love for the present moment, for one's self-aware being, for the appreciation of others, for the love and beauty of the nature, and love for the mystery of the sacred. Now, talking about spirituality, how do we define spirituality? This was recently published in a journal called Annals of Palliative Medicine, published in 2017. This was written in 2009 by a consensus conference on spirituality. And the consensus definition is, spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or the sacred. That's a fairly broad and all-inclusive definition of spirituality. Now, we all know what is mind, because we deal with our mind throughout our lives. But it's very hard to define what mind is. And if you look up in the Wikipedia or Dictionary of Psychology, or my textbook that I wrote, or other traditions, there are various definitions of mind. One of the big things to understand the difference between definitions of mind, if you read the Western literature, mind is all-inclusive. It's a very broad term that includes consciousness, includes self, includes everything, psyche, conation or intentionality, cognition or thinking, and affection or emotions and feelings. Whereas in the Eastern literature, especially the Vedic tradition, mind has a limited meaning. It only has 4 functions. One is what is called chitta. Chitta means memories, all kinds of memories that we have all our lives. Then buddhi. Buddhi is the intelligence, where we decide one way or the other. Then ahankar. Ahankar is the feeling of being me, or ahambhav, or the ego, you might say. And then manasa is the process of meditation or thinking. Now, so it doesn't include complete consciousness. It doesn't include the innermost being or the self-aware being. So, because it helps in meditation to free yourself of the mind to some extent and not be dominated by it, which is interesting. Interestingly, if you look up Wikipedia, there are 4 different definitions. I'm not going to go into all the 4. But in one definition it says mind is the faculty of an entity's thoughts and consciousness. Now this entity is such a broad word, it could also include like robots and artificial intelligence and computers and all that. People are questioning that. Can a computer or a robot have a mind? So that is debatable. Another good definition is mind is the stream of consciousness where sense impressions and mental phenomena are constantly changing. So that's another definition you will find. In my book, I had taken a neurobiological perspective. So in that, one of the definitions was, mind is a processor of patterns in the flow of arousal, energy, information within the brain. Another definition was mind is the principle of intelligence, the spirit of consciousness regarded as an aspect of reality. Now, once we understand mind to some extent from our direct experience, we can also notice and appreciate that mind has the different stages of growth and development also different stages of evolution in human beings and also other animals. So, based on some of the yogic and the Buddhist literature and the meditation practices, I kind of decided that there are about 7 stages of mental growth. The very first stage is what is called Muda. Muda Chitta. Chitta means mind. Muda means Muda means a mind that is dull, unenergetic, bored, ignorant, disinterested, and maybe even confused at times. Second category or second stage is Kshipta. Kshipta means a mind that is impulsive, hyperactive, unruly, chaotic, unpredictable. I'm sure all of us can relate to this because we have all gone through these stages during our childhood and development, and we see it in children and even young adults and even grown-ups, these different stages. The third is Vikshipta. Vikshipta means a mind that is distracted, daydreaming, and wandering aimlessly, unintentionally. The fourth is Ekagra Chitta. This is the mind that is focused on the task at hand, well concentrated, intentional, and purposeful. The fifth is Niruddha. Niruddha means a mind that is calm, composed, self-organized, self-integrated, effortless, unselfish, with a caring attitude towards others and the natural environment. We all try to develop these qualities. The sixth is called Uparama. Uparama means it is the ability to be able to pause or stop at any moment in any situation. It's a very advanced stage. We have to have really good prefrontal cortex to be able to stop what has been described as the veto power. A mind that can stop and pause anytime, anywhere. It is usually present-minded or mindful, self-aware, and enduringly at peace with itself and at home in the world. It is well integrated and nested in itself, recursive, resilient, and undisturbed by most events. By recursive, I mean it has its own development within itself. It is organized within itself. And lastly, the seventh stage is what is described as Prashanta Vahita. Prashanta means serene, peaceful, tranquil. Vahita means flowing, is living, is flowing. Such a mind that is in a state of optimal mental flow and experience with a spontaneous and effortless flow of conscious activity. Such activity is autopoietic. Autopoietic means self-generated, spontaneous, effortless. It also is autotelic. Autotelic means the activity is an end in itself. There isn't something more to do or more needed or more desired. It's complete in itself. That's why it's autotelic. One becomes naturally creative and innovative. One has a loving presence while interacting with others and the world. It is a natural flow of optimal life. In such a life, one is free, enlightened, and inspired by all things. As the Zen saying goes, one of my favorite sayings in Zen tradition, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. To be enlightened by all things is to free one's endlessly. This is a quotation from Dogen Genji, 1200 to 1253. Now comes the difficult part, which is how do we define the brain? Brain, of course, is the most complex organ or most complex physical object in the universe, some people say. But it has multiple levels of organization, from atoms, molecules, cells, cell assemblies, interconnections, circuits or networks, and then functional subsystems, and then the whole system. I tried to simplify this by talking about 10 different functional circuits, starting from below up. I won't go into too many details, but if you are interested, I have a printed paper on it. One is spinal medullary network, where our respiration, cardiac activity, our swallowing, coughing, sneezing, all these reflex activities occur in there. The next one is pontocerebellar network, in which there is locomotion, our walking, coordination, gait, motor and vocal activity, speech, crying, singing, procedural memory, bladder control, all these activities or horizontal eye movements are in that network. The next higher than is the mesodiencephalic network, where our conscious arousal, awareness, attention, vocalization, phonation, speech production, head rotation, hearing, balance, pain, pleasure. The one above that is hypothalamic endocrine network. Now here there is a flexible clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is constantly guided by the day and the light and dark cycle in the environment. The solar cycle, lunar cycle, cosmic cycles, they are all integrated and influence the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this controls our sleep and wakeful cycle, our hunger and activity cycle. All these are regulated by suprachiasmatic nucleus. And then there are peripheral clocks in the organs like liver, kidneys, spleen, etc. Hypothalamus is like controls all the autonomic nervous system, metabolism, appetite, sexuality, temperature regulation, etc. Then the amygdala network, which is essential for emotions like joy, fear, anger, facing danger, dealing with survival issues. Then the next one is hippocampal cortical network. In the hippocampus, we have all the formation of new memories. Memories about our own place in the world, and also location of others. So location of ourselves and location of the other, and the interaction between self and other. Also memory our whole autobiography is recorded in the hippocampus. The network above that is occipitoparietal temporal network, about this area of the brain, where finer interpretation of sensory data occurs, of words, images, sentences, mathematics, music, right and left side, all this processing occurs. The one above that is anterior cingulate, or the default mode networks, which is always active, and it is self-related processing. Me, mine, my interactions, my problems, all that happens there. And then finally there is the prefrontal, this front part of the brain, which is the most recently evolved part of the brain, which not many other animals have as developed as the human beings have. And this prefrontal cortical network is involved in self-regulation of behavior and experience, recall of memories, behavioral planning and decision making, global workplace or the field of non-specific awareness, sense of agency or being the executive. I am the doer, I am the experiencer. And global cortical inhibition, in which this prefrontal cortex can shut down most of the rest of the cortex, at least temporarily, during meditation, which is amazing. And this can happen either directly inhibiting the medial temporal cortex, or through the reticular nucleus in the thalamus, which then inhibits the rest of the input to the cortex. Spontaneous self-effulgence, self-freedom, holistic being, and our loving presence. Finally, I want to share with you my poem and end the talk with this poem. This poem is called Nested Life. All life is nested in life. I am living, I am alive. My living is nested in the whole life. Living is breathing, moving, sensing, flowing. Living is also navigating through the majestic river of life. When one learns to flow with life naturally, there is no need to navigate stressfully. One lets things happen as they may, effortlessly. It's like whitewater rafting without fear. We must trust the flow of life. Life refreshes itself spontaneously, incessantly. When one is wholly present and aware, one is refreshed and renewed continuously. Life is infinitely new, creative, and recursive. One is life, life is one. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts that they'd like to share?
Dr. Deshmukh, I tried to listen carefully. I think I heard the word conscious one time. Do you distinguish between consciousness and mind, or how do you relate consciousness to mind? Especially when you mention the difference between where our brain is compared to where, say, other species.
There is a big debate going on in neuroscience about defining consciousness. In fact, there is a whole subfield known as consciousness studies. And if you overall look at the literature, some people think consciousness and awareness as the same thing. But some people differentiate. When I say, and I like to differentiate in a way. In consciousness, there is a duality between me and the other in consciousness. While in spontaneous awareness, there is no duality. There can be a feeling of unity, feeling of oneness, being connected to all that is. So in a way, the awareness is a more primal function than consciousness. And then mind, the main thing about the mind is memory. And it's the memory that comes into conscious awareness that then creates the mental activity. In fact, I published a paper in 1982 talking about two modes of being. One is mnemonic or mnemic mode, which is dominated by memory, and the other is presence or present-mindedness, which is fully present in the present moment, completely participating wholeheartedly in the present moment. That is the ideal we all would like to achieve. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh. I'm a neurobiologist, so not a physician, but one of these people that studies the brain. And I'm very glad you came today. For me, the mind is the output of the brain. I mean, the brain is the thing that creates the mind, and the mind is the expression of what's happening in my organ here. And that's part of my spirituality. The other part is my spirituality, coming from a neurobiology perspective, is the fact that of my suprachiasmatic nucleus that you mentioned, I am connected to the sunrise, to the sunset, to the change in temperatures. I'm connected through that to nature and to the universe. And I love that connection.
Yes, that's very true and very absolutely true. In fact, people have done experiments in which in migratory birds, if you damage the suprachiasmatic nucleus, they get completely lost because they have nothing to go by. Their master clock has been dysfunctional. So suprachiasmatic nucleus is absolutely crucial, and that is the source of connection between us and the whole natural reality, the cosmic reality. Your point about the first point you raised, can you say that again, please, the first one?
I said that the mind, what we call the mind, is the output.
As an output, yeah. Now that's an interesting question, because mind is both an output as well as input. Because we have outgoing behavior and actions, and we also have incoming sensory input through all the senses that we have. So it is both incoming input as well as outgoing output. And not only that, between the input and the output, there is an interpretation that goes on within all of us. We interpret the reality in a particular way and develop our own perspective. In fact, we construct the reality that we experience, which is fascinating. So the brain acts like an interface or a surface, interactive surface between the internal environment and the external environment. It's a sensing as well as reacting or responding surface, almost like your keyboard, where you input something and the computer responds to that. So it's like a signal processor, but a very sophisticated and complex, not just one sensory modality, but multiple modalities, multiple modes. But the final currency in the brain is sort of electrochemical events, electrochemical impulses and activities. But it's amazing. It's just a masterpiece. It's a wonder that to study the brain and to learn more and more and to realize how still we are so ignorant about it. And we live with it throughout our lives. Yes.
I was fascinated by what you said about being able to control your brain with meditation.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on that and say what parts of the brain can you control when you meditate?
Okay. This, of course, is a complex question. People have studied using functional MRI and EEG during meditative states, especially the Tibetan Buddhist monks who have meditated throughout their lives for 10,000 hours or so. Now, in such people, when they go into meditative state, what they find in functional MRI is that they go into a higher energy state. See, if we study the electrical activity of the brain, we have a range of frequencies, like 1 to 4 is delta activity, 5 to 7 or 8 is theta, 8 to 12 is alpha, 13 to 25 is beta activity, and then 30 to 90 hertz or cycles per second is gamma activity. And these people go into a gamma activity state, which is fascinating. So they are fully alert, but they are completely calm and serene, which is interesting. Now, you're talking about control. Control is a kind of interesting word with many connotations. We only have a partial control on what goes on in our body as well as in the world. A lot of things happen by themselves, spontaneously, by the laws of nature, by the laws of the body and the biological facts. But with that partial control, which we call will or volition, we can develop our own experience and develop our own habits, in the sense that especially children play like the red light, green light. You may have heard of that. When there is green light, you start walking. When there is red light, you stop. This ability to pause or stop a behavior is a very important capacity. I was surprised that my son, our family has a dog, and my son taught Ringo to pause before he goes for the dessert he gets every now and then. And he can literally wait for 15-20 seconds, which is a long time to stay sitting and do nothing. So we all go through that, and children go through that. Instead of jumping to do something, you can pause. And this ability to pause and stop is very important, and that depends on the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex can directly control the medial temporal lobe, which is amygdala and hippocampus. So controlling the emotions and the memories. Our memories keep popping up, emotions flare up. So we have to calm all that down. So the prefrontal cortex can influence the medial temporal lobe. It can also influence the subcortex, where our arousal, drowsiness, instead of being drowsy, become alert and calm. And then having a crowded, busy mind, wandering mind, you have just 1 or 2 contents in your mind, and finally even those 1 or 2 contents disappear, and you enjoy the serene flow of the present moment. So, thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. This was very enlightening. Could you speak a little bit about memory? I find that my memories are changing. And I don't know if that's because they reside in certain brain cells that are disappearing or what.
That is a good question. There are many different types of memories. Some memories are very short. Some are almost electronic, instantaneous, what have been described as mirror neurons. Somebody does something, you look at it and you do the same thing. We call it, see it and do it immediately. Of course, that is another way of learning also. Then there is a working memory. Working memory is like looking up a telephone number and then remembering the 7 digits. And then if nobody interrupts you, you can then use that to dial the number. But if somebody asks you a question in between, the whole thing is gone, you forget it. Unless you have rehearsed it in your own mind. Then there is intermediate memory, which lasts for several minutes or so. That's some kind of plan. And then there are long-term memories, like several hours, days, and then there are lifelong memories. You can distinctly remember what happened 40 years ago, and you can regenerate some of those feelings around. Now, talking about memory not being as good as it was before, everybody experiences that, especially at my age. I also noticed that I don't remember, since I retired, I have forgotten many of the names and the technical details because I'm not using those every day, which I used to do. So, some of the forgetting is what has been called benign forgetfulness. So, we all go through that stage that some of the names and words that we are not used frequently, they tend to fall aside. But if we really pay attention to it, they will come back after a few minutes. So that is normal. But if in your everyday life you are not functional, that means you cannot take care of yourself, or you forget important appointments, or forget how to make a cup of tea, or dress yourself, or write a nice letter, then that can be a problem, and we need to seek advice for that. But if you are functioning well in your daily life, but have forgotten some of the technical names, then that is benign, that's normal.
Hi, you had spoken a little bit about something nucleus. You had brought it up as well. I didn't catch the first part of it. It was about the rising and setting of the sun and how our environment affects us. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? And does the moon fall into that? Like, does the moon sort of affect us with that part of our brain?
Yes, moon is important. In fact, some of the Indian calendars are based on the lunar cycle and not the solar cycle. In both Hindu and Buddhist literature, moon is extremely important. And every full moon is celebrated for one reason or the other in the Indian culture. Somehow the full moon gives us a sense of exhilaration. Before the electricity was developed, full moonlight was a great occasion to enjoy the whole community as a whole. Have a feast, have dance and songs and whatever you wanted to do. It was a night for celebration in villages. So moon is crucial. The earth has cycles. So Earth's geomagnetic field is important. The atmosphere, biosphere is important. And then the lunar cycles, solar cycles, and also the cosmic cycles. So we are really, literally connected to the whole cosmos and cosmic energy. Only thing is we are not aware of it. We need to become aware of it and appreciate this great wonder that we are fully embedded and nested in the whole cosmos. All of it.
And what's the name of the nucleus thing?
Oh, the nucleus is called suprachiasmatic nucleus. Suprachiasmatic nucleus.
We'll take one more comment.
I very much enjoyed your presentation. I had an occasion when I was a graduate student at Stanford to learn hypnosis, and it was very helpful to me because I was nervous getting in front of a large group of people giving a talk, but I learned to have an auto-suggestion that I gave myself, and I was completely relaxed. The person who taught me that had the ability, and I witnessed it, to totally numb his hand, and he could put a needle through it. And I never did understand the biophysics of self-hypnosis, how it works, how you can do such things.
Well, that's a good and difficult question because hypnosis still works, and there are many societies that train and use hypnosis for various physical and mental disorders. And as you mentioned, auto-suggestion is a very powerful tool. Our inner talk, inner speech is very profound. In fact, most of our self-regulation and self-control is by inner talk and inner instruction. So by auto-suggestion, we are instructing ourselves to ignore that pin that is going through the finger. So you inhibit the pain system by auto-suggestion to such an extent that even if you prick somebody, it doesn't feel much. You can change the sensitivity of your sensory response by auto-suggestion. It's like strong habituation. Once you get used to it, you're not aware of it. It's not even there. So it can be both ways. You can either habituate yourself to an experience so you don't notice it, or you can enhance your sensitivity that you notice even the smallest change, even the smallest sound, the subtlest sound. So we can work both ways, and probably the prefrontal cortex is very much involved in changing this threshold for sensory experience. So from prefrontal to sensory cortex, you can have this regulation or control. But a lot to be learned about hypnosis still, a lot to be learned.
Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh.
I think somebody else had a question at the back.
One more.
Thank you. I would like to ask you if in contemporary discussions of consciousness and the body, if ever any experts try to bring up the concept of morality. It's been a long time since these questions have arisen. When we can remember, probably this whole scientific method had its origins maybe at the time of Socrates and that sort of inquiry that he initiated. And he mentioned that if we leave morality out of the picture of explaining human beings, we're going to miss a point. And his example was, as he sat in prison, some people would say he's there in prison because his legs are bent, there's a bench, the sinews in his body are in a certain configuration. And that would be the purely physical explanation. But he said to leave out my choice to stay in prison would be an extremely careless way of talking. And I hear the discussion of the brain and the electrical impulses and those sorts of things. But do contemporary researchers ever talk about choice and morality? Or is it that's just been left out of the picture? Thank you.
That's a good question, and I want to clarify. When I use the word presence, presence is not just cognitive presence. It's not just thinking or perceiving or observing, but there is also the feeling, I am here for you or with you. And therefore there is a natural feeling of compassion, love, care for the other, especially if somebody is suffering for whatever reason. So that feeling is there, which is part of the presence, and naturally you do your best to get along with your family or friend or even a stranger. So presence includes that feeling of compassion and love for others.
Is that discussed by researchers?
Not quite, because morality becomes a whole different field, and there are many people, like the second level do's and don'ts, like 10 Commandments, it becomes a whole different topic. So most of the neuroscientists kind of stay out of it, out of the morality question. But there are other philosophers who very much deal with that, how to get along with people, how to train your emotions. Emotional wisdom is to get along with others and to be compassionate, to be caring for others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Let's continue our discussions downstairs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.